This is GyroGearloose with RV Hacking on the Cheap, and today we're going to discuss weight distributing hitches. The first question is, do I really need one? If you're not currently using a weight distributing hitch, ask yourself the following questions. Am I towing more than 5,000 pounds with a bumper pull? When hitched up, do my headlights point high? Does my bumper squat noticeably when I place the trailer on the ball? When towing around a curve, does your front end feel sloshy or floaty, or a similar description for just not feeling that your steering is connected to the road correctly? Similarly, does it feel like your tail end is being dragged around the curve a little bit before it straightens out again? All of these are indications that you are dangerously in need of a weight distributing hitch. Now let's discuss what's actually happening. Here is a typical truck. After extensive engineering, the designers have engineered your truck to have a correct balance between your front axle and your rear axle. They placed enough weight on your front axle to maintain correct steering, and enough weight on the rear axle so that it will follow you around turns. This ratio may not be exactly 50-50, but the percentages must be maintained even when towing. Of course, you don't connect the trailer directly in the middle of your truck, so anytime you are towing, you are upsetting this balance to some extent. Generally, over about 5,000 pounds of trailer, you're upsetting it too much, and you need to have a weight distributing hitch to correct it. But what happens if you don't correct it? Well, the amount of weight on your axle is what increases friction, which is what controls traction. Most people who have driven in the winter are familiar with fishtailing. Without enough weight on your rear axle, it loses traction. While your front axle steering continues down the road, your rear end proceeds without you, going around the turn and swinging out. If you instead lose traction on your front axle, your rear wheels will try to go straight down the road, while your front axle turning wheels simply go off the road. This is called plowing. Even if you don't tow in the winter, all the same rules and physics apply. And they're made much worse when you add a trailer to the back. Without enough weight on your rear axle, a heavy trailer will want to continue straight and actually help you fishtail, as well as jackknifing severely once it does. Without enough weight on your front axle, you'll lose steering, and then the heavy trailer will continue down the road and whip your tail around. Once again, a severe jackknife. Any tendency to jackknife can be extremely difficult to control when towing a heavy trailer. Briefly, the manual use of electric brakes on your trailer can correct a moderate fishtail. However, this requires incredible presence of mind and fast reflexes, so certainly don't count on it. It's always better to set up your tow vehicle correctly and never get into the situation. In addition to weight distribution, there is also an effect from bad geometry. If your hitch ball is too high or too low, each acceleration or braking cycle will either crush or lift the rear axle. This would be exactly the same effect as bad weight distribution, and in the middle of braking would be one of the worst times you want to lose steering. We'll address bad geometry first, as it's the simplest to see and correct. You may have surmised by now that the objective is to maintain the same percentages of weight for each axle, with or without a trailer. If you routinely carry a heavy generator or fuel cans or similar heavy weight in your bed, then you should unload them before adjusting your hitch. Again, we want your tow vehicle balanced the same as intended without a load. Don't worry, we can put those heavy objects back in the bed later, but they do count toward your load, and they will affect the balance. We talked about the tow vehicle, but now let's address the trailer. As shown here, the trailer should be exactly level, which is to say, if you measure from the frame to the ground at the back of the trailer and the frame to the ground at the front of the trailer, that should be the same measure. This actually makes the trailer slightly nose heavy by design, but it should ride completely level when attached to your tow vehicle. And now, as shown, you may notice that there is a difference between the ball and the hitch receiver. This is the bad geometry that your hitch has to compensate for, and it's usually fairly simple adjustment. To adjust the hitch height, we just play a bit of Goldilocks. Here's my hitch. As you can see, there's a series of holes. In order to adjust the hitch height, I simply remove those two heavy bolts, move it up and down, and put the bolts back in at the new height. But what's the correct height? To determine that, simply back your tow vehicle alongside your hitch and see what the difference is. Here you can see my hitch would be too high, so I would move it down a couple holes until the ball is at the same height as the receiver. Assuming the trailer is still level here, this would mean that my hitch is too low, and I would bump it up a couple holes until the ball rests at the same height as it would be if it was inside the receiver. You have found the correct height when it looks like this, looking sideways. Note that the receiver is not on the ball here, it's in front of it. If I actually lowered the trailer onto the hitch, both would squat, and that's why we're doing the weight distributing hitch next. Your setup should now look something like this, with the trailer level and your tow vehicle at the correct orientation. The receiver and ball should be ready to mate, so go ahead and reload the bed of your truck if you have any heavy objects you routinely carry, and then actually put the receiver onto the ball. This will cause your bumper to squat, because your trailer is supposed to have tongue weight. Most weight distributing hitches simply have a chain on each side, and the chain will either go onto a tip-up hook or lock onto a cam that you rotate, or a similar setup. As you might have guessed, the objective is to level out your trailer again. So pick a link roughly in the middle and snap your hitch up so that it's taking the weight. Once again, measure point A and point B and use up more chain or use up less chain until your trailer sits level again. It really is that simple despite what your dealer says. At this point, your rig should be set up correctly. If you previously had issues with floaty steering or trouble braking or your headlights being at the wrong height, hopefully those have been corrected now. You can make further adjustments if they haven't, but you should be very close to correct. A final safety note: if you still feel like you have handling issues, you may simply have too small of a tow vehicle for the size of your trailer. Unfortunately, dealers will often sell the wrong trailer for your tow vehicle. Alternately, you may still have some other mechanical issue and should have it checked out by a competent mechanic. You might be wondering how a weight distributing hitch is able to lift up your hitch. That would be some sort of anti-gravity, right? In fact, it's a sort of lever arrangement. Rather than lifting your rear axle, it's actually trying to shove your front axle into the ground. It does not make your hitch weight any lighter, but instead transfers part of that load to the front axle, and that's why it's called a weight distributing hitch instead of a weight removing hitch. Once all adjustments are made, you really should not feel the trailer significantly changing your handling. Yes, you're heavier, but it should happily steer and brake as normal. If this instructional video has been helpful to you, you hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps. This has been GyroGearloose with RV Hacking on the Cheap, and stay tuned for our next video when I'll discuss adjusting your brake controller.